Hey there, podcast listeners. Exciting news. My new audiobook, The Short Book Formula, A Financial Professional's Guide to Writing a Book in 6 Weeks to Attract Ideal Clients, is out now. And the best part, for a limited time, we're offering this audiobook to you for free. Hurry over to www.theshortbookformula.com and claim your copy now. And now, on to our show. Welcome, everybody, to the $1 Million Producer Show. I'm pleased to introduce my guest today, Mr. Bill Cates. How are you doing, Bill?
Doing great. Not Bill Gates. Bill Cates. Missed it by one letter and a few billion brain cells and dollars.
I was going to say, thank you for the clarification.
You bet.
Appreciate it. And so let me give a brief introduction, and then we'll dive into what I believe is going to be a very interesting conversation for our listeners. So Bill Cates has devoted the last 30 years to the art and science of relationship marketing for financial advisors. Bill has 3 books on the topic of referrals. Get More Referrals Now. I like that name. Don't Keep Me a Secret, also a good title, and Beyond Referrals. Bill's the founder of the Cates Academy for Relationship Marketing, as well as the host of the acclaimed Top Advisor Podcast.com. And that podcast is now ranked in the top 10% of podcasts worldwide. Recently, Bill was named the #1 influencer for financial advisors in a survey by Indigo Marketing. Bill's newest book is Radical Relevance, and this groundbreaking book shows financial advisors how to develop and communicate more relevant and compelling value to cut through all the noise and to win more ideal clients. And Radical Relevance is near and dear to my heart. I've been working with financial advisors myself since 2016 from a marketing strategy, a marketing approach. And in all that time of helping them, I think radical relevance is the biggest obstacle, or one of the biggest obstacles they face. And so I'm really looking forward to this conversation today. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
So let's start off with probably the most obvious question. What do you mean by radical relevance, and why is this concept important enough for you to have written a book about it?
Sure. We know that our prospects, everyone really, is bombarded by just, hundreds, if not thousands of messages every day. People have put all kinds of barriers up to reach them. It's just hard for us to reach prospects, even clients sometimes. And so in the subtitle of the book, Radical Relevance is sharpen your marketing message, cut through the noise, win more ideal clients. So cutting through the noise requires a message that is super relevant to that prospect. Otherwise, they'll ignore it. There's just too much else coming at them. And so I use the line, be relevant or be ignored. And, the brain needs to have messages be relevant so it can know what to pay attention to and what to ignore. And so behind that is really, truly getting to know our clients, probably narrowing our focus a little bit to make sure that we have a good target market and a good bullseye within that target market. And so that all the messaging, everything we do and say will resonate with those folks. So that's the essence of what I mean by radical relevance.
The concept of a target market is near and dear to my heart.
Mm-hmm.
I learned the concept originally from a gentleman named Michael Port, who wrote the book called Book Yourself Solid, and I was trained by him back in 2014. And I've fully embraced that message, which is why when I went into my own business, I had to choose a target market, and it became financial advisors, financial professionals more broadly. In working with financial advisors, when I asked them, who is your target market? You can imagine some of the replies I probably get, but I'd love to have you expand upon that from a couple different angles. One, just what is a target market? 2, what are the common challenges people have in committing to a target market? And perhaps 3, if you're up for it, what are some of those criteria that people should use to judge if a target market is the right target market for them?
Sure. So take the first one. What is a good target market? Or what is a target market? One of the things I have to mention is making a distinction between a category and a market. So, for instance, a lot of financial advisors will focus on folks 5 to 7 years from retirement, let's say, or it could be families with young children, all kinds of demographic things. Those are really categories. Those aren't really markets because there's no association or really place of gathering of people that are, 5 to 7 years out of retirement. It's when I think about a target market, I think about a well-defined place where people, quote unquote, congregate. Now, the congregation may be in person, it may be online, it may be a little combination. So typical target markets in financial services, I just got off a coaching call with a group that focuses on universities, university employees and administrators, medical practices, business owners, preferably in a specific industry. A lot of advisors will nest in large companies and, because they know their benefits package and whatnot. One of my interviews with a guy named Jeremy out in Milwaukee has nested in Harley Davidson. Another one, Don Hilario out on the West Coast, is nested with Google. A lot of examples of that. And then there are what I also call affinity groups. So they're maybe not technically a target market, but they function like one. So athletes, for instance, professional or high-level athletes, college athletes who are now able to make money on the NIL. It could be families with children with special needs. There's also an affinity group, folks engaged in philanthropy. So again, those are more target markets as opposed to categories. What stops or the challenges? Well, a couple of mistaken assumptions. First of all, some people think, well, if I just focus on these folks, I'm going to miss all this other opportunity. And actually, there's some truth to that. You may, but you'll be so successful in your target market, you won't even notice, you won't care. One guy interviewed for my podcast, Adam Schmela, who focuses on optometrists, he said his only regret was not doing it sooner. And then one of the others is, what about my current clients? Well, I have to stop serving them. And of course, no, you won't have to stop serving them. Now, you may choose to scale your business and bring in another advisor to take care of some of those legacy clients, possibly, but you don't have to. And in fact, some of those clients that have been with you may even know some folks in the niche. So it's not like not them, now them, now this group. It's both. It's together. It's okay. Some people just aren't sure when to do it, how to do it. And what was the last? Oh, criteria. So a few things. First of all, it has to be large enough. And it doesn't have to be full career large enough, but certainly large enough to make sense to invest a little extra time and energy, maybe a few dollars to pursue a target market. They have to have the financial capacity to take advantage of the work you do. It could be assets, could be income, could be other things, but nonetheless, for whatever processes you use and what kind of work you like to do around financial planning, advising, investing, they got to have the capacity to take advantage of that. It helps that you like the people, generally speaking. And that guides a lot of people to targeting. So Malcolm Etheridge, he was a computer science major in college, but he realized he didn't quite have the talent to really make it as a great computer software developer, but he still likes being around that. And so now he is the financial advisor to those folks, has his own podcast that reaches out to his target market. And I guess the last one, it may be the most important, is they have formal and informal ways of communicating with each other. They have meetings, they have associations, societies, newsletters. They congregate virtually, in person, et cetera. So what we're trying to do here is, sometimes I call this reputation marketing, where when you have a very well-defined, clear target market, over time, you can create such a reputation for yourself that it really draws people to you. And while the idea of prospecting may never have to go away totally, it'll go away a lot and make everything a lot easier because people are raising their hand and say, hey, I'm interested. What do you do? So I hope that answers all those questions.
Yeah, it does. I want to expand upon that a little bit.
Please.
So I learned the idea of a target market in 2014. I started my new business, and I was really inspired by what I would call coaches, people like yourself and myself that help coach and guide and advise people like advisors. And I spent time focusing on them for a year or so until my first financial advisor found me. The thing I want to say is that sometimes we put a lot of mental energy in trying to discover and find who our target market is. I think one way to discover who it is sometimes if you have a good book of business, it's who do you really enjoy working the most with? And do they have similar traits or characteristics? Are they clustered in an industry? Do they have similarities? Are they business owners? And to your point, are they more specific inside of an industry? I found for myself that before 2016, I probably didn't know what a financial advisor does. And when my first financial advisor found me, I helped him create some massive success. But beyond that, it was just a lot of fun working with them. So the principle I came up with is I call it duplication. If I can duplicate this one person in my business, I'm not only going to be providing massive value, enjoying my work, but I'm going to make a lot of money in the process. And, that's really guided me throughout.
Well, yeah, I mean that's one way that people decide what target market. If it's not really super obvious, then you look at your book, and if you've been at it for a while, then you're going to have these clumps of people. Everybody works at this company, and these people are the same industry, and this is one big family, and all that. So that you could look at that. I like what you said about who do I really enjoy working with, and the work that they do. Am I drawn to that in some way? You really only need one client to kind of get you going in a niche. And in fact, you don't even need to have one. There's other ways to do it, but it helps to have one or maybe a couple. So absolutely. That idea of you enjoy working with these people. I mean, joy isn't something we talk a lot about in this business, but I think we should. And why not? Why not work with folks that bring you joy, either the folks themselves and or the work that you're doing for them, give you purpose, joy, all that good stuff. So yeah, totally agree with what you're saying.
You had mentioned that essentially it's useful and helpful because a good target market, there's lines of communication between them. Right. And so, I think probably the easy analogy to use is that it's like being a big fish in a smaller pond. And especially in this digital age, it's one thing if you are in a smaller mid-sized city, town, and you belong to all the traditional in-person events, Rotary, Chamber, things like that. But when you're in the digital space, it becomes 10 times more important, to use your word, to become radically relevant. Because it's a big sea out there, or it can be. And so the importance of becoming not just relevant, but radically relevant is that much more important. So I guess with that being said, what are some of the challenges that you see in the clients that you work with and coach in helping them to become radically relevant? Or said differently, what are the challenges that they face in attracting and winning new clients?
Yeah, so I guess one of the biggest challenges is that refining their messaging so it truly is relevant and effective, impactful with their prospective clients. I often will spend a fair amount of time with my clients helping them figure out their messaging. Some people are kind of successful, I've learned, almost in spite of not being able to convey strong messaging, and that's okay. But when you start to target a niche, a target market, then in some respects, it actually becomes easier to come up with the messaging because you're getting to hone in and know those people. And so in developing the message, there's a few things that I can touch on here. One is, what are their pain points? What are their prevalent problems, concerns, challenges? And, because they're all humans, they're all pretty similar, but how they express them or think about them in their particular industry might be slightly different. There's certainly things that are specific to them. So, for instance, someone who works at a company, they may not have a lot of debt. They probably have some. It's good to get rid of debt. We know that. But if they're a fairly new dentist, right, and they're setting up their practice, well, they've got a lot of debt financing the purchase or the setup of the practice. If they're, a doctor, a physician, a good chance they've got medical school debt. So that's a problem that you might fix that might not be as relevant or as important to others. On the flip side of that, what are their aspirations, goals, dreams? They're kind of this, the flip side of the same coin. But one of the exercises I go through with folks is to help them figure all that out, because what that yields is the all-important empathy. Empathy means appreciation for understanding, the other. In this case, your prospects, clients, the market. And so you want to make sure you express your value in a way that draws people in, that they see themselves in how you talk about what you do. So going through that exercise of really thinking hard about problems, challenges, aspirations, goals, all of that should infiltrate how you talk about what you do. And so your messaging is much more relevant. And when I get started with this process with folks, I tell them that be ready for your brain to hurt, because this is not easy for everybody. How do we get a concise message that's clear and then impactful? Sometimes it takes a little going around and round and round before it actually gets figured out. And it always has to pass in the morning test. It's meaning we can work on some messaging. Most people have experienced this, and it sounds great. You go to bed, sounds good. I got it. I figured it out. You wake up in the morning and go, I'm not sure. Or you try to say it in the meeting and the words don't come out right. And then you got to go back to the drawing board a little bit at least. So that's some of the challenge around this. It's all doable. And I think everyone should revisit how they talk about their value from time to time, just to make sure that it's staying relevant, staying on the cutting edge of what your prospects and clients need to hear from you.
Definitely. To expand upon that, it's really seeing the world from your ideal prospects or ideal clients' point of view.
Yes.
I think so often we start with, these are my services. These are the people I want to market to. I want to talk about the features and benefits of what I do. And I think a lot of people are there. I would say the best marketing is where you flip that. You start with, who are the people that you want to serve over time, and really build yourself up in that target market or community of people, and then really get to working on getting to know them. At the end of the day, you want to be able to know the conversation going on inside of their head as well as they do, and possibly even better, where you can already anticipate the questions in advance, and you want to get to that level, but really see the world from their point of view, what their challenges are, what their desires are, and then present your solutions, which is your products and your services, in a way that meets their goals and desires. I'll give you one example. A client of mine, his name is Michael Budnick, and I would describe him as a holistic financial advisor.
Okay.
We're working on a couple different books with him. And one of the books, we decided to target nurses, which is a pretty specific group. Great target market, especially, they're discoverable. You can find them, you can see where they hang out, etc. And one of the things I love encouraging clients to do as part of the book writing process, which I find very valuable, and I'm sure that you do some sort of this yourself, is I encourage them to conduct what I call an incites interview. Because we have our assumptions based on our experiences. This is what I think they think, and we have our assumptions, and sometimes they're valid and sometimes they're not. And so as a very concrete case in point, we had started with the idea that we would call this book Smart Nurses Finish Rich. And we were like that. That's pretty clever. Smart Nurses Finish Rich. And I think it was a riff on another book that has a similar pattern, but we plugged in nurses in there. And then I had him do some insights interviews. And I think he did at least 3, maybe more. And I listened to them because I'm always learning myself and trying to get better at my own craft. And guess what? In those insights interviews, at no point did they talk about getting rich. What they talked about was security, peace of mind, having someone that can help guide them. but at no point did they demonstrate that they were motivated by being rich. So that was very informative for us. And as a result, we ended up changing the name of the book to The Prosperous Nurse. The point that I want to make is that it's how do you demonstrate that you're relevant to them, and how do you challenge your own assumptions? And one of the best ways I've discovered over time is to do insights interviews, which is simply asking the questions, shutting up, asking the questions, letting them talk.
Yeah, actually, in my book, Radical Relevance, I have the 17 rules of radical relevance. And number 2 says, give your clients a seat at the table. And what I mean by that is don't do this work in a vacuum. Yes, you can make a pretty good guess as to what you think they want, need, how they would say it, but never assume. And that's a perfect example. So again, you want them to see themselves in how you talk about your value. So if you say smart nurses finish rich, well, if most nurses don't use the word rich, don't think about rich, I mean, they probably like it, but it's just not a common thing in their thinking, then they're not going to see themselves in that title, and they'll ignore it because it won't be relevant. It's perfect. I'll give you 2 examples. One guy I was actually two advisors, partners, and they were doing this. I had them do this assignment, and they talked to a few clients. And one of the clients says, you know what I like about you guys, and what I've told others is, I call you guys the dream makers. And they go, oh, that sounds interesting. What do you mean by that? And well, you're making sure that I fund my dreams. You said to me, there's nothing worse than an unfunded dream. Let's make sure that money is getting set aside, funneled, allocated, so you can actually live that dream. And that's been huge for me, right? So these guys look at each other and go, that's it, the dream makers. And that will resonate with certain people, and it might not resonate with other people, but that's what you want. You want your value proposition, or how you express it, to resonate with the folks you want to attract. It won't resonate with the folks that don't resonate with that, and that's fine. It's okay to be exclusionary in that sense, because you want to work with the people you want to work with. One of my clients, a leader of a group, says, Bill, I tell people that I say, Bill Gates makes asking for referrals as natural as breathing. And I go, wow, that's pretty good. I never would have thought of saying that. And I use it. However, I don't use it as marketing hype. In other words, if I say, hey, I can make your, asking for referrals as natural as breathing, well, that just sounds like marketing hype. So I'm not doing that. I'm just quoting Michael Schmitz from San Mateo, California. And that's one thing that everyone on this call can do. If you feel reluctant to brag, if you've been taught not to brag, to toot your own horn too much, well, just quote what your clients are saying. So you're not bragging, you're quoting. It makes everything a little bit easier.
I think, broadly speaking, there's 2 types of referrals, at least in my own mind. And I listened to a podcast that you were on with John Cutton in preparation for this. I think John's a mutual friend and client of ours. And I heard you using the word introduction, which I thought, I use that word too. I much prefer the word introduction to the word referral for various reasons. But the question, or the kind of the context I want to ask about, is I think for many people, when you speak about referrals, what's most common is, I would call it the one-to-one referral. So you have a client, they introduce you to a person, and you potentially get one new client. So that's very common. What I'm more interested in talking about is what I would call getting referred into or introduced into centers of influence. And the reason I think that's so valuable is that I would rather get 10 new clients at a time. I'd rather get 100 new clients at a time. I think, just given that we all have limited resources, energy, time, etc., that my time is better spent doing what I would loosely call authority marketing, and discovering how I can create strategic relationships that can power many clients versus one at a time. So how do you become radically relevant, or get referred to or introduced into those centers of influence for an advisor that will really fuel their growth in their business?
It's always a great thing to talk about. And what we know is that with the right types of centers of influence, and these are often folks that will never become clients, in terms of the value, the monetary value to you could be worth a whole lot more than any one client in terms of who they can send to you. So instead of saying being radically relevant to centers of influence, although one could apply that, I'll change that and say become radically referable, because the biggest thing to get referrals / introductions from centers of influence, folks that may never be a client, but have the ability to put you in touch with folks, is you got to be referable. And the joke I often make is, that I can't tell you how many advisors I've talked to that, can identify with this statement. Met an accountant, attorney, learned about each other's business, sent a few referrals to the accountant. They become clients of the accountant. Nothing's coming back, right? First of all, we need to know that, generally speaking, accountants, attorneys were born without the reciprocity gene. So they don't always get that. And just because you send someone to them doesn't necessarily make you referable. They still got to know what you do. And they're risk-adverse people. So the biggest and most important strategy for centers of influence is making sure they really do know what you do and for whom you do it and how to connect you. All these things need to be formalized at least a little bit. And so the advisors that have the most success I've seen with centers of influence, especially the risk-adverse accountants and attorneys, are going through the whole process, soup to nuts. This is what we do. This is what it looks like when we reach out to a prospect or they reach out to us. And here's our discovery meeting. And here's the different things we do and case studies and all of that stuff. So the person says, I get it. I feel good about it, right? Remember, they're risk adverse. So they've got to feel really, really good about sending folks your way. And that takes time. And you've got to commit the time to it. And they have to be open to it. So it's indeed a relationship game. But it's also a bit of a numbers game in that you got to find the accountants, attorneys, and others who are willing to develop this sort of relationship. Not everyone will be willing to do it. Some are interested in compensation, a revenue stream. Some aren't. Some wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole because they feel it compromises their ethics and neutrality and all of this. So you just got to figure that out. One final thing is, don't ever assume that a center of influence relationship needs to be reciprocal. In other words, don't assume that you have to give referrals back to the accountant, the attorney, or the other folks in your world for them to feel good about sending people to you. They don't always care about that. They just want a great resource to which they can send their clients and feel good about it. So you can actually have a couple of CPAs that maybe it is reciprocal, and then you could have a couple others that don't care about your referrals. They just want a good advisor for their folks. So don't assume it has to be that way.
I think two things that you and I have in common when it comes to our own marketing and positioning in the marketplace. And I can tell just if someone's listening to this, they can't see, but they've heard in my introduction. Now, you're the author of at least 4 books. And I think I understand you're working on a 5th book. And you also have a podcast that we're currently on. And what we have in common is that I'm the author of 3 books and I have a podcast, which we're currently on. And I've found, especially over the past 3+ years of personal experience, that when you want to elevate your game from getting single referrals, which are great, to becoming that much more relevant, referable, is to use authority marketing tools. And for me, 2 of the best tools that are available to advisors and really just professionals more broadly is book authorship and is podcasting. Whether it's from a personal perspective or whether it's from clients that you've worked with, what are your thoughts about becoming radically relevant through authorship and or podcasting? Or do you see anything else out there that I haven't mentioned that are equally as effective?
Wow. Big question. A few things, a couple of things around the book. Look, as a financial advisor, even if your compliance department won't let you say you're an expert or you have expertise, then compliance usually lets you say that. Or you're a specialist. Or you specialize in. Check with compliance. Some compliance departments don't let you call yourself a specialist or an expert, but they will let you say I have expertise in or I specialize in. And so as far as I'm concerned, experts speak, experts write, experts are credible. And gosh, do you have to have a book to be successful in this business? No. Does it help? Yeah, in two main ways. One is that it shows that credibility. You wrote the book, you're the author. I mean, it's great to share someone else's book. It's great to share articles that other people have written. But when you're the author, that elevates a little bit. And, then it becomes also a tool that your clients and centers of influence can use to introduce you. Look, she wrote the book, right? Now, one thing you've added to this by talking about the advisor that had a book specifically for nurses, now that's even more relevant, right? Because he could have a book for physicians, for nurses, for hospital administrators, right? Could be all in the medical field, but each one is narrower. And I know you preach this shorter book, which I agree with, because first you want a book that people will actually read. That's the book thing. I mean, it's a great tool. A lot of advisors are doing it. I heartily recommend it. Now, onto the podcast, similar. The folks that I've found that have the most success with a podcast, and there's exceptions, there's always exceptions, are folks, advisors who have a target market. I mentioned Adam Shmela, who focuses on optometrists. He has a podcast, and it's something like 2020 Finance, right? Optometrist 2020. Malcolm Etheridge has one around for tech folks. And so those folks tend to do very well. And what they've told me is that the prospects will come to them and say, I heard you on the podcast and I like the way you think. Or Malcolm said that some of his prospects almost finish his sentences because they've heard him talk about what he talks about and they know where he's going with it because they've already heard it. So they come kind of with their hand raised, ready to do business. If people want to get a sense of who you are, they want to get a sense of your knowledge, your credibility, who you are as a person. And that comes out in a podcast because the voice is there where it doesn't come out as much in like on your website necessarily, unless you're maybe using video. So anyway, that's what I've seen with podcasting. It's probably not for everybody, but it definitely has its place. And you put the two together, you got a book, a couple books, short, people read them, podcast, people get to hear you. It's a pretty nice combination to attract people. So Jeremy, I mentioned the guy who has nested with Harley Davidson. He has a podcast. Now it's a little more generic. It's not just Harley. However, he has one episode, and I'll never forget, it's episode 19, that what happened is it was a specific episode specific to Harley, talks about the benefits package, strengths, weaknesses, And that's what his clients are using to introduce him. They're saying, listen to Jeremy's, this episode, and you will see he knows our world. You should talk to him. And that's how he's getting. It's the same thing with a book, right? Read chapter 7. You'll see he gets what we're trying to do. And that's what comes to you that way.
I'm going to comment on something that you said about Michael, and you're exactly right. So we started with writing his book geared towards individual nurses. Mm-hmm. And now that we have that in place and all the marketing surrounded that, of course, now we're continuing to deploy that, but now we're looking at new opportunities or additional opportunities. This, I think, is the magic of a target market, is just the focus. What we're looking at now in his next book is targeting hospital administrators at big hospitals, small hospitals, business owners in the healthcare industry, more of an organizational level. And interesting, when we started this new book project, I said, okay, show me what you have. Show me your marketing material. Show me, what you're currently doing them. And I'm not going to name any names other than him, but my goodness, these are brochures. These are, the material that his company makes available for him. And I think just by extrapolation, this is probably the case with most people. It's features and benefits. And, the higher up you go in affluence and decision-making, you have to imagine that you have 10 times more competition. And so you really need to up your game if you're going to become relevant to said decision maker. And so again, we started with, let's do some insights interviews. Let's make sure that we're seeing the world from their perspective, not from our perspective. And that took a little bit of time. But right now we're wrapping up the book. And I'm extremely proud of it because it really captures the essence of it in a way that decision maker or business owner in the healthcare industry would, I think, be very attracted to. And then it takes them through a story and stories that make the case. And I would be surprised if anyone that got the book, read the book, wouldn't be highly interested. And so, I guess that kind of touches upon a couple things that we've been talking about, target market, but how do you maybe have multiple, targets within maybe a broader market, relevance, et cetera.
Yeah, people ask, can you have more than one market? And you can. I don't recommend immediately trying to do that. Start one, get it established, make sure you know it's working. And then usually the best next market usually has a relationship with the first one. Doesn't have to, but usually does. And it makes it a little easier. Otherwise, you're starting these like 3 separate businesses. Why not have one business that kind of feeds a few different bullseyes? So it's almost more, it could be a different target, or it could be just a different bullseye within the target. Just be a little careful not to be scattered and not to try to expand it too quickly. Generally speaking, the narrower, the better. The more specific, the better. Now, the geography may be a factor. Adam and a few other folks that I've interviewed and studied, they have national reputations, and their geography is in the entire country. Others don't want to do that. And if you live in a small town, well, it may be hard to target certain types of business owners. Or you could do just all service businesses, right? So it's a little narrower. Part of it is because you do better work when you get narrow, and part of it's because your messaging is better and people get you and understand and they see that. So if you have more than one market, one way you can kind of functionally handle this is on your website. People come to your main page. I've seen some people do separate websites for separate markets, but you can have one website, but it's kind of a splitter page. If you're a physician, click here. If you're a nurse, click here. If you're a business owner, click here. And then everything on the website is specific to them. So they click the area to get the information that's going to be specific to them.
For someone that's with us so far and listening to this, I'm sure they're very interested in the work that you do, your books. But tell us a little bit, how do you work with individual advisors? How do you work with organizations when it comes to radical relevance and or referrals?
Yeah, and there's definitely a relationship between radical relevance and referrals, because what is the immediate, or I should say, shortest path to becoming relevant to someone who doesn't know you is to be introduced by someone they know and trust. And so there's definitely a fit there. The borrowed trust that comes with a referral or an introduction will get your foot in the door, quite often opens the door for you. But if you don't keep talking about your value in a relevant and compelling way, the door may not stay open. We coach individuals, we coach teams, we bring training into larger groups. A lot of what I do is based on we call it the Cates Academy for Relationship Marketing. So whether you're a coaching client, group training, whatever, I speak at events too, of course, but a lot of it centers around our academy. And so what it does is it makes all the other work we do much more efficient, because you can kind of get the essence of what I teach on your own time, on demand. But then we get together for individual or group calls or sessions, and then you're a little further along. So it all kind of centers around the Cates Academy, et cetera. So I've been doing this for 32 years. There probably isn't a financial professional out there that I haven't already worked with. And, I know my system can work. And then we just find the way that gets them the knowledge that's best for them. So they'll use it and produce results.
I was trained years ago in the Dale Carnegie training, and so I'm a big fan of Dale Carnegie training.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that they talk about is that common knowledge is not common practice. So when I hear the word referrals, I think, oh, referrals, yeah, I do that. Other people do that. I know about that. What's one or difference maker when it comes to how you get people to go from, I would say, common knowledge to actually common practice where referrals are a mainstay, or they're doing what referrals should do, introductions
Right.
should do,
Right.
and it's not just this thing that we think we should be doing, but we in fact don't do very well.
Yeah. A couple things come to mind. First of all, a lot of people think they're asking for referrals / introductions, but they're not really. They're really promoting. They're saying, hey, never too busy to help others. Or if you ever think of someone that should know about what I do, let me know. And things like that. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. And that actually can produce some results. I teach about 10 different ways, effective ways to promote introductions. And by the way, I think if you're talking to a prospect, client, center of influence, anyone has the ability to connect you with others, you should use the word introductions and not the word referrals, because that indicates what you really want, which is a connection, an introduction. So they make the mistake of thinking promoting is asking, number one. They also make the mistake of thinking asking can hurt a relationship or can make you look needy or unsuccessful, and there's nothing further from the truth. In fact, there are ways to do this that come from a great place of importance. It's about the client. It's about the value. It's about paying it forward. Has nothing to do really with how you get paid, the old methodology, or that you're building your business so you can use your help. So there's some mistaken thinking around there. And then the last place that I'll touch on, where the gap or the log jam is, that having folks that are willing to refer, willing to introduce, and then actually having them make the connection. Some people will talk about us. Well, that's nice. Word of mouth is nice, but it usually isn't enough. Most of those people don't take action, and it's not always the right people that are being talked to. So there's got to be a higher level of proactivity and connection than just the word of mouth. And so in my book, you're not really done with the conversation, whether you bring it up or they bring it up. You're not done until you've arranged the introduction, the connection, whether it's an email handshake, whether it's a Zoom handshake, whether it's in person, round the golf, breaking bread, whatever it is. You're not really done until the connection's made. And so those are a few places where, it's people understand the value, but they don't really execute in a way that's going to produce the result that they want.
And I can't resist asking, did you find that, is it more mindset or is it more skill set? In other words, do you have to shift their beliefs about it, or do you have to get them to actually sit down and practice it until it becomes a natural, normal activity? And I say this because, I don't want to try to toot my own horn, but these things seem to come naturally to me. And so when I'm talking to clients and I'm seeing challenges, I'm like, I don't fully get the problem, and so I'm asking for a lifeline here.
Well, the answer is it's often and mostly both. Most people come to me with the will. They got the want to do it. Most people, because they're human, have some limiting beliefs, some mistaken assumptions about the process that keep some of the ideas, the strategies, and tactics inaccessible to them. But I found that the mindset and the technique kind of work together. And what I mean by that is if I show someone how to, let's say, ask for an introduction that they've never been shown before, and they go, oh, I never thought of doing it that way, then their mindset shifts, right? Because heretofore, they may think that asking for introductions is risky. I'm not going to do it, or it's going to make me look needy or whatever. And then I show them a way to do it, and they go, oh, that's not neat. Yeah, okay. So they kind of go together, right? Sometimes it's the technique, it's the teaching that will eliminate the bad mindset, as Zig Ziglar used to call it, the stinking thinking. And sometimes it's other things. Some people believe that asking for help is a sign of weakness, so they can't bring themselves to asking for help. They really are afraid it's going to look needy. And sometimes we have to get them past that a little bit, but showing them a way to do it that doesn't feel needy then can break it. They're both important, and we work on both almost simultaneously.
Perfect. Final question. Someone's listening and they want to either get one of your books or learn more about you or reach out. What is the next step? What's the best place for them to go to take next steps with you in any of those capacities?
Yeah, I'll give you a couple real quick. BillCatesResources.com, BillCates. resources.com, and that gives you a little list of some of the stuff. Talks about the podcast, some other, lots of free resources are there, things like that. And then the book, Radical Relevance, radicalrelevancebook.com, radicalrelevancebook.com, and you can learn about the book and see if it makes sense for you.
Well, fantastic. So I want to thank you for your time and for all the great insights that you've shared with our audience today. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.